Hello, hello! So I am here to talk about a digital citizenship element, and I'm going to talk about digital safety today and being safe on the internet. And so I wanted to focus on identity theft and all the scams that are out there. And we really want our kids to be aware of it. So from Common Sense Education, I'm going to talk about their lesson plan on scams and schemes. So our essential question in here is, what is identity theft and how can you protect yourself from it? So that's our big thing. So first I want to look at the learning objectives and why it's important for teachers to cover these objectives with students. So in this lesson plan, students will be able to understand what identity theft is and why it's important to guard against it, and learn to recognize strategies that scam artists use to access private information. I also think it's so interesting that they're called artists, because that's really saying something, and that could be a broader discussion to have with our students. And then the final objective is to students will be able to learn how to guard against phishing and identity theft. So I just wanted to focus on these objectives for now and talk about a personal scam story that I've had recently. So this lesson plan stuck out to me because of, you might have heard about it, it's called the Can You Hear Me scam. So I get about 2 to 3 phone calls per day recently, and I haven't been answering, but I saw on the news recently that there's a Can You Hear Me scam going around. And what these people are doing is you answer the phone, you say hello, and they say, "Can you hear me?" And that's the first thing they say. And if you say yes, they take your yes and use it against you and use it to buy all sorts of things with your credit card information and everything. They want your verbal yes. So I got one of these phone calls, and so I answered. First thing they said, "Can you hear me?" And I said, "Huh?" So that's just, you really need to be aware, because these scams are out there and they want to get you, and they're greedy and they're out there. So it's really important to let our students know this. So I just want to go over this lesson for us. So first, you have some handouts that'll be on the bottom. The key vocabulary is very important too, because if our students aren't understanding what this vocabulary is, then this lesson won't even work. So first is a warm-up. And this warm-up I really, really love, because middle school especially, these students love to talk about horror stories that have happened or that they've heard happen. So even this question, do you know someone who has been scammed and what happened, is just so prudent to talk about with your middle school students, because they will definitely have something to say about it. So this warm-up is great and just a really good hook to get students involved in the discussion. So then you go on to talking about what identity theft actually is. And I love this, especially in an English language arts classroom. I'm all about asking the question, how can we brainstorm best? So what we ask is, can you guess what kinds of personal information identity thieves might look for? So they've got all of this different information, and students can brainstorm as best as they can, and I will write on the board what they think. So what kind of personal information can these identity thieves take from us? So they can take full name, date of birth, social security, account numbers, passwords, anything that will make you, and here it is, vulnerable. And so anyone is vulnerable to these online scams, and that's so important to talk about with students, especially, schools around here in Albemarle, most of them are able to have a 1-to-1 laptop to student ratio. And when students have laptops, they immediately become vulnerable and maybe possible victims to some sort of scamming. So it's really important to teach this lesson. So anyone's vulnerable, so that's really important to explain to your students, and I love that this lesson talks about that. So next is how to catch a fish. And in this moment, I would love to also talk about that MTV show Catfish, where people think they're falling in love with somebody on the internet, and it turns out that it's somebody it might be like an 80-year-old man or something like that, and it ends up not being who they think they've fallen in love with. And I think that'd be a great way to get students involved in this conversation. So then the Spotting Scams student handout is down below, and I'll also scroll down there in a little bit. but then you read aloud the instructions on that handout, and you can talk about it. Students can work together to figure out this handout, and they can compare their answers. And then I love going over this together. I think that's really, really important, because if you're giving students like examples of emails, you need to go over it with them and have a responsible adult telling them that this is what's wrong with this. So next, it's protecting yourself from online scams. So this part is great too. You're just keeping on coaching students about this, and it's a really good way to get your students to understand phishing and scamming and everything. So then finally there's a wrap up, and for English language arts this is perfect because I could do a quick write by asking students the questions that are on this plan. So it says here, you may want to ask students to reflect in writing on one of the questions using a journal or online blog/wiki. So I would probably do this online blog because that's just something I would love to do in an English language arts classroom. But you could do it in any of these ways, and I would love, love, love to ask these questions after this lesson plan. So have students reflect on these different questions, or one of them, even if you wanted, and just really have them think about it, and make sure before you move on that students have been formally assessed on this, because it's so important if you're having laptops in your room that they understand this. So here, the handout I was talking about above, this is it. And it's really great. And I just think it's so important to have students before is the key word, before they get those laptops, to go over all of this. And before they have internet access, it's so important that they understand that no, they didn't win $100 from a bank. That might not be real. That might be a scam. So make sure students know this as young as 6th grade. It's so important. So yeah, I loved this lesson plan, and I could see myself enacting it definitely, as I said, before they get their laptops, maybe at the beginning of the year. So yeah, so thank you for listening, and I thank Common Sense Education for this wonderful plan and multiple wonderful plans that they have on this website. So yeah, I encourage you to check this website out. It's great. Thank you, thank you, thank you.